All right, welcome back. So today we're going to look at how to document this in terms of 2D technical drawings. So looking at these walls, they are going to have a plaster finish, which is likely going to be this white color. So let's go here in the ground floor and make sure that that's what is happening. So if you look at our walls, you can see that we just have a cross hatch, which indicates that this is going to be a brick finish, but it's lacking a layer of detail which shows where the plaster is going to be. So for that, we're going to change our walls such that they are composite in order to add different layers to them. So if I select my wall, you can see here in the settings, for you, likely this tab is not here. It's probably somewhere here up, like so. And in order for you to be able to see those things pretty well, you can hold it by going to this other area and bring it out, and then you can embed it to the left somewhere here, not on the upper side, because that would be not what I like to have, but rather on this side. Yeah, I prefer that. Okay, so with this selected, you can see that we have different methods that we can draw that wall. So the first one is the simplistic one that we used previously, but then here we have how to make it. We have the second option, which is for making it composite. So if I select that, you can see that we have the wall has changed to a layer here plus another layer. So we want to make our own custom layer. So in order to make our own custom layer, we need to go to options, element attributes, and then go to composites. So in here is where you create those kinds of walls. You can see that within archicad we already have some composite settings, and we want to be able to edit those. For example, I'd like to start with what is already existing, the brick double plastered, because that's what I'm looking at. So we already have a brick double plastered, but it is 125 millimeters thick, and yet our walls are 200 millimeters thick. So I would like to increase this brick to make it 150, because I believe that's the thickness of a brick, and then we can increase the plaster to about 25 and 25, such that the total of it is going to give us a wall of 200. But then this is going to actually mess up what is already there by default. So that's why I think it is a bad idea to override what's existing. Let's create our own. So options, element attributes, and then we say composites, and then instead of changing the 125 directly, we can create our own, and maybe on this copy we make it 200 millimeter thick. All right, so we are creating a 200 millimeter thick variant. We make this 150 for the thickness of the brick, and we make 25 millimeter plaster above and 25 millimeter plaster below to make it 200 millimeter thick. And we say okay. Of course nothing changes, and that's because we have to select this wall and choose within these options for double plastered brick, which should be somewhere here, brick double plastered, but the one which is 200 millimeter thick, the one we have just created. And just like that, we have ourselves a nice wall here which has a brick and a plaster on either side. Pretty cool. And then we want to change all our walls all our exterior walls to be like that. So for that, we will pick up parameters, we click on this wall, and then we click inject parameters, and we inject those parameters in this wall, and you can see that it actually changes to that. And we click inject again, and we inject those parameters in this one as well. Inject again in this other wall here, and or the shortcut, which is Ctrl Alt, click on this one, and you can see that the whole of this round walls have been changed to brick together with the plaster finish. And Now we also want to change the interior walls because they also need to be something a little bit different. So for the interior walls, we're going to use another material that's in, so that we do not use the same material over and over again. Let's try out creating our own. And if I have this selected and we change the structure of this to the second option, which is the composite option, you can see that's the one that is shown by default. We also have something like a stud partition, because this is an interior wall. We may need something like a partition, a stud partition, but I'd like to make some changes as well to this stud partition. So for that, I can even right click with it selected and say edit selected composite, and then I go in here and change a few things. But before I change anything, I need to create my own, because that is going to mess up what is already existing. So we are likely going to make it 100 millimeter thick. Ours is going to be stud partition with insulation. Let's just add some layer of insulation, like foam board or something like that. Okay, so we have created our own, and then we go in here and we will have a gypsum plasterboard at the beginning and then a gypsum plasterboard, and instead of just having space, we will fill it in there with some insulation mineral soft, something like styrofoam in there, so we can have some timber frames in that position for stability. So I'll say okay, and of course it doesn't change because we have to change this from stud partition to the new one we have created, which is stud partition with insulation and 100 millimeter thick, and that will be it. And as well, we can change the reference line, because currently the reference line is at the center. So if I uncheck this, you can see that we have some space left. So in order to maximize the interior space and put the wall on the outside, we can change from center to outside. Okay, there it is. And we will pick up these parameters by alt clicking, or pick up parameter, this tool right here, and then inject parameters by control clicking in order to have something like that. So I'm going to control alt in order to add those parameters in there, and you can see that now we have ourselves a nice interior walling. And then we can as well come in here and put it in there. So you can see that this one has been formed on the wrong side, so we want it to be flipped. So we can click there to flip it, and we go ahead and do the same for this one and flip it on the opposite side. And that's pretty cool. And as well, I'd like to have it on here, although for this one, in order to have the same size of room here and same size of room, we had better use the center line as opposed to any of the sides, okay, such that we have the same size of room. And that would be it for composite walling. And of course, whatever we have done, we need to do it above, and as well, we should have created these on this wall here, which separates. So I think this is going to be necessary in this area. And by observation, you can see that these walls move whenever we inject these parameters. So in this case, I would want to have these ones on the opposite side, so I flip them such that it's on the opposite side. And my intention is to have 2 meters in here, such that we have like a meter for one of the stairs and another meter for the other side of the stairs, the dogleg stair. All right, so that means that this wall, which has been formed on this other side, needs to be flipped. So we select it and flip it, and then we have something like so, which is pretty cool. And what that means is that these walls should move as well and take up the rest of this other side. And of course, if you wanted to add some detail to this wall, you can do as well, because you can add a layer of plaster across, but this just serves for purposes of demonstration. I kind of am happy with that, and you want to do the same for the walls above. So let's go to the first floor, and then we go ahead and alt click all of these. So we have these walls on the extreme ends, which should be plastered, and then of course also the walls which are on here. So we go ahead and control click to place these elements in here, and of course they have been formed on the wrong side, so with them selected we can just hit flip such that they have been flipped to their respective areas, and as well making sure that these elements go back to where they're supposed to stop. And what that means is that some of these elements need to be taken back as well. All right, I need to take this to somewhere here, and this one as well needs to stop somewhere there, which means that this element needs to be taken back, and as well as this here. So you can go ahead and clean up some of these elements in order to have a much cleaner representation, and you can always watch what happens in 3D, hoping that nothing is pretty messed up. Of course, a few things will be messed up, so you can fix them a little bit. For example, the elements which are on the basement have been moved, so you want to make sure that you come in and clean some of those elements. Okay, so I will have to go in here and just clean them using the pet palette. Yeah, you click on the edge and then choose the offset edge, and you offset some of these elements. Okay, we need this to be intersected, and as well this one to be intersected, and some of these elements need to be offset. Me offset by some distance. All right, and I just feel like even the white here should be offset backward such that it overlaps, such that we do not see some of those terrible elements under here. So we have only white. Okay, okay, just making sure these elements have been moved on either side. All right, that's so much better. Although these elements need to go down probably by 150, so they start on the ground because they were essentially floating, but that's way better kind of representation for this model. And of course we need to go ahead and clean up the first floor as well. Pick the wall, and then we go to the terrace floor, which is the terrace floor, not the first floor but the terrace floor. And in order to see what is beneath, that's what the trace reference is all about. So you can go ahead and affect those elements. And of course this has been formed on the wrong side. Flip it to the other side and move some of these elements. Yeah, you need to move some of these elements, and making sure that this roof as well is aligned. Just to make sure that I'm doing the right cleanup. and we need to be able to see the things below. So choose reference to be the below current story. So yes, this is what I'm talking about, such that this wall is really just on top of the one below. Yeah, so make sure that that is what you're actually achieving for those elements. And as well, we have the elements here which need to be fixed. Okay, flip this, not necessarily, but in the center, such that it covers, it's directly on top of that. And this one as well needs to be flipped. Once we had it in here on the roof, we control click to add this one. And what we essentially are trying to avoid, if I go to 3D, is some of these areas like this. So you can see that right there it has been fixed, and these are some of the elements that we are trying to avoid, those protrusions. And as well, I can see something happening here, but this is due to this element which has been terminated by this roof. So we want to take it back a little. So clicking on any of those nodes, we can take it down here to somewhere here, so we don't have that as well. So let's go ahead and clean up some of the things which are happening here. So you can see this wall is not aligned, so you want to change the reference, I think, to the center, such that it's directly above what is beneath. And as well, if you wanted, you could have this one as well and center it like so. And I think this room has been made smaller, so we might as well use the center such that it gets a little bigger on the inside. And then we have this wall as well, yes, which has been fixed, and that's really cool. Let's see if this can as well be made well. Okay, using the center line, and just that it may be well in the middle. And of course we have the roof as well, because the roof has some of these wall elements, so we want them to be directly on top, but so making sure that we are using the correct wall positions, and Control Alt to add those things, and making sure that we are actually on top of the other. Okay, so let's go in here and inspect and see what's actually happening here. This is demanding us to increase some of this roof, and that's way better after increasing that roof. All right, so the model is clean. Of course, that's important for the elevations, and we additionally have a much more detailed floor plan, because if you look at this floor plan, we have a few elements here. We have some plastered walls, and we also have some of these stud partitions as well. All right, so let's now clean up by removing all these polylines. So with polylines selected, I can say Control A to remove all those lines, because right now we are going to do some detailing, and this is the last thing you need. All right, so now that this has been done, we head over to the next lesson.